On a good night, a bad jump gives you a thumb. Maybe half a forearm if the freight clerk got sloppy with the manifest. You log the piece, scrape it up, send it to fire, and by the end of shift you hardly remember which crate it came from. Tonight was starting that way. I stood at the edge of Arrival Bay 6 in my splash suit, visor spattered, watching a shipping container that had not quite made it out of the pad. Most of it had arrived the way it should, sitting square on the guide tracks. The back third was sunk into the floor like someone had pressed it into wet cement, and the contents had done what contents always do when you move them wrong. A forklift lay on its side in the middle, wheels snapped off, and half its frame merged into the container wall. The operator was mostly inside the metal, mostly in the wrong order. His ribs faced outward, like someone had taken his chest apart for display, and then lost interest before putting him back together. "Tag on the lift reads Rowan Hart," Raffi called from inside the container. "Company code matches the manifest. You want to confirm or just trust the paperwork?" I stepped up onto the warped lip and peered in. The smear that used to be Rowan's torso trembled a little each time the pad field cycled, a faint tremor travelling through the fused metal. 2 meters to my left, his head had printed independently, face down in a tangle of plastic strapping. "We confirm," I answered. "Always confirm. The suits upstairs go cross-eyed if we get creative." "Copy that, boss." Rowan gets his dignified line in the report. He pulled a scanner from his belt and held it over the head. The device chirped once, picked up the chip in the man's jaw, and filled in the rest from the personnel database. Name, age, dependents, the usual. I tried not to look at the dependents field. There is no benefit in knowing who is going to get a call at 3 a.m. "Vitals?" I asked. Raffi stared down at the fused mass of chest and forklift frame, out of habit, more than hope. "Flat. Has been flat for a while. You'd be impressed if not. Mark non-viable physical destruction authorized, local, no tissue recovery. Done." He tapped through the options, then stepped back while I raised my hand towards the overhead. "Bay 6 cleanup request," I called. "Container ID on screen. Mismatch event, high fusion, auto scrapers only, no lift drones, human remains flagged non-viable." The pad intercom activated. "Copy 6, queue is clear. You got any live ones in there, Brogan?" The voice belonged to Digby Coyle, our shift supervisor. He lived in an overgrown swivel chair 2 decks up, watching a forest of monitors and drinking his way through the authority coffee budget. Digby did not come down to the floor unless something had already gone wrong enough to hit his metrics. "Nothing living," I answered. "We're in the easy part of the night. Music to my ears, scrapers on the way, don't slip." The rails in the floor shuddered under my boots as the auto scrapers rolled out. Each unit was a waist-high thing on thick, segmented legs, with a front blade shaped like a snowplow someone had sharpened for war. Their job was simple. Whatever did not match the pad's last known flat baseline got shaved off and fed to fire. That included metal, concrete, and the occasional former citizen. Raffi hopped down from the container and joined me on the floor. We watched as the first scraper climbed up the edge, blade lowering with a hydraulic whine. "You ever think about the guy on the other end?" he asked. "The one waiting for his forklift and getting nothing but a hole where his load used to be." I kept my eyes on the machine as it met the fused torso. "He will file a claim. Logistics will argue. Insurance will award him a modest sum. The forklift gets written off, and Rowan goes in a footnote. It all balances." "Like you rehearsed that in the mirror?" "I did," I told him. "Back when I still believed it." The blade bit into the metal and meat together, shearing them off in a smooth, ugly slice. The chunk slid onto the conveyor track beside the pad and trundled toward the incinerator gate. The sound was a mix of tearing fabric, grinding steel, and something softer that reminded me of cutting a roast with too much cartilage in it. I kept my breathing even. First responder training never really leaves you. Your body thinks it should be sprinting and shouting. The authority prefers its remediation leads calm and composed. Containment, not heroics. Rest of the container looks straightforward, I said. Let the machines earn their keep. We'll do a walk down in 15 and sign off. Raffi nodded and pulled his visor up for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. You buy dinner if we get through the shift with under 3 incidents. You aiming to jinx us? Absolutely. I want decent noodles, and the authority never pays enough hazard bonus to cover my tastes. He dropped the visor again, and we moved back towards the edge of the pad, giving the scrapers room to work. Behind us, the incinerator gate opened on its own schedule, accepting the first load with a muted rumble. Heat brushed my back in a gentle wave. The rest of the cleanup went like clockwork. Scrapers carved the container down to a clean outline, drones swept in to capture rubble, and by the time we finished the walk down, Bay 6 looked like nothing had ever gone wrong there at all. That is the real job, under the gore and paperwork. Our department exists to make sure the transport grid still feels safe in the morning. We filed our report in the nearest console alcove. Raffi ran through the checkboxes while I dictated. Time of event, mass involved, probable cause, human casualties, environmental impact. By the time we finished, Digby had already approved the preliminary version from upstairs. On the verification screen, our messy reality turned into neat lines of text and a few graphs. Energy curves rising and falling, all within acceptable margins, except for the jagged spike where Rowan and his machine lost alignment. A classic misweight, Raffi muttered. They stack the container wrong, center of mass drifts, the pad does its best, and we get to play carpenter. At least nobody tried to ride this one through, I answered. Count your blessings, he snorted. You call that blessing? I call that job security. The intercom chimed again. 6, you two are clear, Digby told us. Take 10, then swing by Bay 4. I got a report of phantom readings on the receivers. Might be a sensor going out. I glanced at Raffi. You still want those noodles? If Bay 4 is just a bad sensor, I will personally carry you to the restaurant. Then we should definitely go fix it. We stowed our suits in their frame hooks and walked across the catwalk-level corridor towards the brake alcove. The bay doors rose up on either side, tall enough to swallow trucks, quiet now that the scrapers had returned to their nests. The transport hub felt almost peaceful in that moment. Big, empty pads, status lights all steady, the arrival field a faint shimmer just above the plates. I let myself enjoy it. On nights like that, the worst you deal with is human error and a few unlucky ribs. We grabbed coffee from the dispensers, brown, bitter, and technically potable, and leaned against the rail that overlooked the central slab. Below us, the arrival grid stretched out like a giant chalkboard, lines and markers showing where incoming loads could safely materialize. You ever think about being on the other side again? Raffi asked, cradling his cup with both hands. Out in a jump truck, rolling cargo through the gates instead of cleaning up what splashes. Once, I answered. Then I remembered the part where jump jockeys get turned inside out in interesting ways and decided I prefer a mop. He smirked. You never talk about that first responder gig. You wake up one day and decide, I know, I'll take a job scraping people off the floor. Something like that. Before he could push further, the slab lights shifted. It was subtle at first. The arrival field, that faint haze that always hangs above the pad when the system is on standby, brightened and thickened. The status arcs around each bay drew power, a deep line climbing on the nearest monitor. I frowned and set my coffee down. We got anything scheduled this late? I asked. No heavy loads, Raffi answered, checking the wall display. Just a few personal jumps and a courier crate. Nothing for Bay Central. Then why is Central lighting up? Digby's voice came over the general channel, sharper than before. All units, eyes on the main slab. Incoming mass on unscheduled vector. Ops is checking. Remediation standby. I stepped closer to the rail. Bay Central was not supposed to be used for routine traffic. It was the oldest and largest pad in the facility, a wide, dark rectangle at the heart of the grid that ran deeper than the others and tied into the oldest parts of the teleport machinery. They kept it in reserve for emergency reroutes, and high-mass experiments that never seemed to happen. Tonight, the old bay woke up. The field above the slab thickened into a silver mist, then began to twist. It reminded me of heat over asphalt, except the distortions moved inward instead of rising. Lines of light snapped into view at each corner of the bay, racing toward the center. "Looks like a redirect," Raffi muttered. "Somebody's pushing a big load through from another hub." "Through Central?" I shook my head. "We do not clear Central without weeks of prep. Digby, where is this coming from?" "Working on it," he answered. "Ops is yelling at the network. I'm seeing a macro flag I have not seen live in my career. Do not go down there yet." Macro transfer existed in training documents and rumor, not in our day-to-day operations. On paper, it was what you would use if you ever needed to move an entire small town in one go. Say when a flood barrier failed, or a fault line gave way under a settlement. The energy requirements alone made it a fantasy for most of us. None of the city pads were rated for it, not officially. The field darkened, swallowing reflections. The hairs on my arms prickled as the floor beneath us vibrated. A slow, deep tremor. "May as well watch from the best seats," Raffi murmured. We leaned out over the rail together. The arrival surge hit like a silent impact. One moment the slab was empty. The next, there was too much there. A city block stamped itself into existence in the middle of the bay. It did not land clean. Buildings appeared at wrong heights and angles, overlapping and cutting through each other. A row of ground-floor shops printed halfway up, hanging across what should have been a street. The street itself showed up diagonally, burying parked cars halfway into an office tower. Concrete met concrete with bad intent. Glass erupted outward, catching the bay lights. Metal folded with a sound like an enormous sheet torn by bare hands. The ground shuddered again as unsupported sections collapsed, cascading into each other. People appeared everywhere. Men in coats, men in work uniforms, men in sleepwear. They printed in mid-step, mid-turn, midway through sitting on a couch that was no longer entirely there. Limbs sank into walls and did not stop. Bodies fused with furniture, half embedded in door frames, pinned inside stairwells. I saw a man stand fully formed at the edge of what should have been a sidewalk. Then his left side forgot itself, drawn sideways into a brick wall that arrived half a meter off target. His torso spread across both surfaces, skin stretched tight. He had just enough face left to scream. For a moment I forgot my training and just gripped the rail. On the bay floor, the auto-scrapers jerked awake in their nests. Their control systems registered a massive misalignment and kicked into emergency mode. Lines of machines rolled toward the new structure on their rails, blades lifting. They were designed for freight crates and the occasional small group of arrivals, not this. They went anyway. "Remediation, stand by," Digby barked. "We do not have clearance yet, do you hear me? Scrapers are running automated. Do not step onto that slab." I had no intention of going anywhere near it yet. My mind was still catching up. A city block, not a warehouse, not a convoy of trucks. A whole neighborhood ripped out and dropped onto our pad like a brick onto a plate. "This is a mistake," I muttered. "No one would sign off on this, not here." Maybe they had no choice. Emergency evac. Earthquake somewhere. The scrapers hit the outermost rubble and stalled. The front blades met a tangle of fused bodies and cars and storefronts. Hydraulic systems strained. Safety logic routines tried to treat the mass as inanimate, then pinged off the faint residual signals from embedded chips and active jump tags still inside people's bones. The machines were not built to understand 1,000 men half wrapped around their neighbors, all technically still occupying a registered arrival unit. A warning tone rose from the bay. Red strips lit along the catwalk rail, painting everything in harsh color. "Digby," I called. "You seeing that hang?" "I'm seeing every alarm this place can throw," he answered. His voice sounded wrong now, stripped of its usual boredom. "Ops is getting garbage from the network. They are insisting the transfer completed successfully at the origin. Nothing on their logs about a major misalignment. I do not care what their screens show. You have eyes on it. What are you looking at, Brogan? I watched a corner building slump in on itself as the street that supported it arrived half a level too low and half a meter to the left. A row of windows folded inward, glass chewing through the shoulders of men pressed into the frames. I am looking at a macro transfer that never should have landed here, I answered. And your scrapers are not going to clear it in a week. Understood. Remediation, suit up. I want you at the perimeter, not inside. You get me eyes on structural stability and live head count, and you do not touch anything until I tell you. Authority Command wants data before they admit anything broke. Copy. The word came out automatic. Habit. I turned from the rail. Raffi still stared down at the bay. We are not rated for this, he whispered. We are cleanup, not siege engineers. Get your suit, I told him. We can be underqualified and still on time. We ran. The corridor to the gear room blurred. I remember the sense of the walls moving past and the taste of stale coffee in the back of my mouth more than the actual steps. First responder muscle memory took over. I grabbed the nearest suit with my size mark, stepped in, sealed the seams, snapped the helmet collar into place. Our suits were simple sealed coveralls with a reinforced hood and visor, not full hazard armor. They protected against fluids, moderate heat, and stray sparks from the scrapers. They were not designed for standing inside a collapsing city block. I shoved that thought aside and checked my seals. Raffi slapped my shoulder. Comms check. I hear you, I answered. Channel local. Remediation team only. Digby, we are heading down. Perimeter only, he reminded us. Any sign the structure is moving in a way you do not like, you pull back. Ops thinks we can still isolate this to Central if we act fast. He sounded like a man reading from a script. Isolate, contain, minimize. The Authority Dictionary. We jogged down the access stairs to the bay floor. Each landing brought the new structure into a different perspective. From up high, it had looked like a tangled cube of buildings and streets. From ground level, it filled the world. Where there should have been an open, flat slab at the center of the room, there was now a cliff face of concrete and glass. A storefront hung 50 meters above, crushed against what used to be an apartment block. A subway entrance, complete with railing and steps, had materialized sideways and fallen until it caught on a tangle of crushed vehicles. The air was full of noise, not a single clear sound but layers. Distant shouts, metal groans, the hydraulic whine of scrapers stuck against the outskirts. Watch the rails, I told Raffi. Last thing we need is a scraper blindsiding us because it thinks our ankles count as rubble. We followed the painted line that marked the safe perimeter. It ran in a rough oval around the central slab, just far enough back that if something collapsed outward, you had a chance to run. Bodies lay near the boundary. Those men had been on the edge of whatever street or plaza the block contained, close enough to the cut that the arrival field treated them as belonging. Some had appeared on solid ground. Others had printed mid-air and fallen. A few had tried to run before their legs finished arriving, their motion frozen half a second apart across several steps. My training wanted me to count vitals and triage. Remediation protocol wanted me to log everything first. Start with living, I told Raffi. We are not moving them yet, but I want markers. Anyone who is conscious, talking, breathing on his own. Everyone else gets tagged passive until we have a plan. You think there is a plan coming? He asked, scanning the nearest torso. I think the Authority will eventually decide whether this is worth admitting, I answered. Between now and then, we do our jobs. The nearer we got to the mass, the more wrong it felt. Teleport accidents usually had a certain finality. Something went off target, printed halfway through a wall, and that was it. The field collapsed, energy drained, and you were left with a snapshot of the exact moment things broke. This did not feel finished. Every few seconds, a tremor ran through the structure. Walls shifted a few centimeters and then slid back. A bus that had printed half swallowed by a shopfront twitched like it was trying to reverse. A man embedded chest deep in pavement jerked as if yanked by invisible strings, his head snapping to the side to face something I could not see. It was as if the macro transfer had failed to decide where everything belonged and was still negotiating with itself. I stopped next to the pavement man. His upper body rose from the ground at an angle, arms spread, fingers clawing at the air. From the waist down there was nothing. No blood, no torn organs, just a smooth grey plane of material that might have been concrete, might have been condensed field residue, might have been both. His eyes tracked me. That was the part that got through, even after all my years on the pad. "You with the authority?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "You are at Central Hub. Do you know where you were before this?" The movement rippled down into the fused material, sending a faint shiver through it. "Home," he rasped. We were at home. The announcement came. We were told to report to the plaza. The relocation token lit up and... His brow wrinkled as if the memory blurred at that point. "And it hurt," he finished. "Then this. Why am I stuck? Where is everyone else?" "They are here," I told him. "They arrived with you." Across from us, a stretch of wall bulged outward as something inside tried to move. Plaster cracked, revealing an eye and part of a cheek pressed flat against the inner surface. The eye rolled wildly, then stopped. The pavement man's gaze flicked that way, then back to me. "This is not all of us," he insisted. "The plaza was full. We were shoulder to shoulder. The guide told us the whole district was going at once. It was a trial, a test run. Get ahead of the storms, move the neighborhood inland." His breath hitched. "Is the rest behind us? Are they coming?" I hesitated for half a second, then shook my head. "We do not know yet." His fingers dug into the air. "You have to stop it. You cannot let them land like this." "Brogan," Raffi called. "You need to see this." I stepped away reluctantly and joined him at the nearest access console. The pad perimeter had a series of embedded terminals, simple metal pillars with screens and manual control interfaces. Most nights they were dead logs or standby readings. Now, the screen glowed with a stream of warnings. Raffi had already drilled down into the diagnostic menu. He pointed at a line highlighted in yellow. Macro receive, active anchor. Link, established transfer status, incomplete, stage 1 of unknown. Anchor link, he muttered. That is not in any day-to-day config I have ever seen. I scanned the rest of the display. The pad believed it was in the middle of a macro transfer. It thought the arriving mass was anchored to some origin point that was still feeding it adjustments. Each tremor through the structure lined up with a spike in the correction readout. It was still trying to fix itself. "Digby," I called. "You getting this on your end?" "Reading it now," he answered. "Ops confirms that macro flag. They also insist we do not have macro rights on this hub, which is charming under the circumstances. Can you disable it from there?" "Negative," I answered. "Anchor controls are locked to administrative level. Someone higher up turned this on." There was a pause on the line. "Authority Command just informed me that Central is acting as a passive receiver," Digby went on. "They claim the macro transfer was initiated from a district hub, and what we are seeing is a routine relocation that encountered, and I quote, minor field instability." I looked at the man in the pavement, at the eye in the wall, at the shifting mass of city block grinding against itself. "Minor," I repeated. "They assure me the system will complete its correction once the anchor at the origin finishes stabilizing. Their numbers show a high probability that misalignment will resolve on its own." Another tremor ran through the structure. A balcony creaked and tore free 20 meters up, falling and vanishing into a crush of stone and glass. Raffi watched it go. "Their numbers can come down here and dig these people out." "They are telling us," Digby continued, "to hold position, keep the perimeter clear, and let the process finish. They warn that any manual intervention on our end could disrupt the anchor link and cause a wider failure." I stared at the console. The schematic showed our pad as a simple rectangle, with the arriving mass represented as a block of shifting color. Lines extended from it into the network diagram, leading to an origin point labeled only as District Relocation Node Secure. Above that, in faint text I had never seen outside a training sim, was a menu heading Macro Control, Authorized Personnel Only. You believe them? I asked. Digby hesitated. I believe the network is telling them what it was built to say. I also believe you are the one standing on the floor. Give me your assessment, Brogan. I watched another shiver run through the buildings. With each correction, more walls cracked, more bodies twisted. The pad under my boots trembled in response, as if the anchor link ran straight through the concrete. This is not a static failure, I answered. Whatever they started still thinks it is in progress. If we let it finish, it is going to keep dragging pieces through until it thinks the puzzle fits. And if it never fits? Raffi asked quietly. Then it keeps trying, I told him. Digby's breathing came through the channel in a faint rush. Understood. I am escalating to command. In the meantime, containment protocols stand. No one in or out of that mass without clearance. You two stay mobile, keep logging, and look for a way to cut power locally if this gets worse. The console chimed. A new line of text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Macro transfer progress, awaiting stage 2. I felt the hairs on my arms rise again under the suit. The rest of it is still trying to arrive, I murmured. Behind us, the pavement man groaned. I turned back to him. He stared past me at the quivering city block, eyes wide, fingers twitching. They are coming, he whispered. My brothers, my neighbors. They are on the way. My job on every other night was to scrape up what was left and write reports for a supervisor who would never see the floor. Tonight, I stood at the edge of an unfinished city that wanted to finish arriving. And procedure did not feel like an answer at all. Digby pulled us back to the catwalk while Command argued over whose disaster this was. He patched us into the channel for a few minutes. That was long enough to hear the authorities' upper floors do what they do best, panic politely. Central's readouts show an ongoing macro event, one distant voice insisted. You cannot risk manual interference from that end. You could destabilize the anchor. Your anchor is driving field corrections that are tearing men in half, Digby snapped. I have remediation on the floor watching it. The algorithm predicts eventual stabilization. What does eventual mean in real time? Static, answered that one. I stood with Raffi at the rail, watching the half-made neighborhood shudder. Every tremor lined up with the console's progress bar ticking a fraction forward toward some meaningless number. Below us, the pavement man had gone quiet. His chest still rose and fell, shallow, his fingers curled into claws in the air. Raffi leaned his arms on the railing. They are going to gamble, he murmured. Leave it alone and pray the transfer sorts itself out before anything important breaks. Important meaning the pad, I answered, not the people in the way. That goes without saying. The channel activated again. Digby's voice came through first. Remediation. On me. We are joining Command's call with visuals. You two are my eyes, and you keep it polite. Understood? Copy, I answered. The next voice was new, sharper, and carried the kind of patient authority that comes from years of letting other people clean up your messes for you. Brandt, Morell, this is Director Saul Taggart. I oversee transit operations for your sector. Raffi straightened instinctively, as if the director could see his posture through the ceiling. Yes, Director, I answered. We are on the catwalk above Base Central. You should have our feed. We do, Taggart replied. First, you are to be commended for your rapid response. You have kept the situation contained to the primary slab. That buys us options. Commended. I watched a building corner slump another few centimeters, shedding glass. Permission to speak frankly, Director, I asked. You may. This is not contained. The structure is shifting every few breaths. Your anchor is still active. Every course correction tears more of it apart. Macro relocation is a complex process, he answered. Micro adjustments are expected. Our priority is preventing a system-wide failure. The district in question houses critical industry. We cannot afford to lose it entirely." Raffi let out a short, humorless laugh. I shoved my elbow into his ribs before the mic picked it up. "The plaza you just dropped on my pad is full of civilians," I answered. "Whatever that district houses, it is not just warehouse space." A pause. When Taggart spoke again, his tone focused. "The relocation is part of a strategic initiative to move vulnerable coastal districts inland over the coming decade. A controlled trial was authorized for your partner facility. They were to initiate a partial block transfer under tightly limited conditions. Due to an as yet unexplained irregularity, the receive point was redirected to your central. That is all you need to know at this time. You key a macro trial without telling the men who run the receive pad," Digby put in. "And when it backfires, the part we need to know is to stay out of the way. Your role is containment," Taggart agreed. "Which brings us to your orders. I have authorization to deploy a hardening protocol. That would involve sealing Base Central under a reinforced shell and ramping the incinerators until nothing mobile remains. This is our final option. Before we commit to it, we require a more precise understanding of the anchor's behavior." I stared down at the fused neighborhood. "You want us to go in?" I said. "Correct. Brandt, you will lead a small remediation team into the arrival mass to locate and inspect the anchor node. We require a physical assessment of the structure around it and any manual controls accessible from your end. You are authorized to euthanize unviable victims encountered en route as per standard remediation protocols." Raffi swore under his breath. "We are not anchor techs. You are the only personnel on site with experience moving through failed arrivals," Taggart answered. "You also have the only suits and equipment rated for that environment. If it reassures you, our engineers will advise remotely." I pictured a line of engineers in some quiet office, staring at clean diagrams while I tried not to lose my footing on a staircase made of ribs. "Director," I asked, "what exactly are we walking into?" "On our end, macro functions are locked. We only have a couple lines on a console mentioning an anchor link and staged progress. That is not enough. How is this designed to work?" Silence. It stretched just long enough to qualify as an argument. "When you move something that large," Taggart replied at last, "you need stabilizers. Fixed points to hold the shape while the rest is in transit. In macro design, these are called living anchors." Raffi blinked. "Living. The human nervous system handles certain field fluctuations more gracefully than inert matter," Taggart went on. "Macro relocation protocols make use of that. A statistically small fraction of the population is tapped as anchor carriers. Their implants interface with the macro grid to hold the transfer volume together during transit. In theory, the anchors experience minimal discomfort. In practice, this trial encountered unforeseen interference." I closed my eyes for a moment. "You wired people into the machinery," I said. "You made them part of it." "Their implants were already part of the network," Taggart countered. "Macro simply makes fuller use of existing assets. That is all the time we have for theory. Our models indicate the anchor core is centralized in a civic structure near the center of the relocated block. On your display, it should correspond roughly to the highest concentration of field activity. Your goal is to reach that location, identify the local control chamber, and report." "And if we find a manual kill switch," I asked, "what then?" "You do not touch it," Taggart answered. "Not until we have more data. Repeat it back to me, Brandt." It was muscle memory. Emergency call scripts, repeating orders word for word so no one could claim misunderstanding later. "Enter the arrival mass," I recited. "Reach the anchor core. Inspect, report, and await further instruction. No manual overrides without explicit clearance." "Good. Assemble your team." The channel clicked over to a private tone as Taggart muted himself for a moment. Digby took the gap. "You do not have to like this," he told us. "You only have to stay alive long enough to give them something they cannot ignore." He cut the link. Raffi stared at me. We are really doing this? Apparently we are. Let us go pick out who we plan to disappoint tonight. We did not hold a meeting. There was no time, and nothing useful comes out of 10 men arguing about a decision that was already made 2 levels up. Digby pushed a list of names to my wristband. He had picked the ones he knew could walk through gore without freezing. I skimmed it and added 1 more, then pushed back. We met in the gear room. 4 remediation techs I trusted with my life, 1 pad engineer with just enough curiosity to be dangerous, and Raffi, because I did not know how to walk into something like this without him at my shoulder. Line of march is simple, I told them as we suited up. We hug the existing structures as much as we can. No heroics. Our job is to reach the core, not to fix everything we see along the way. You see someone we can help without tearing half the street down around him, mark his location. Don't stop. A tall tech named Yorn checked his helmet seals. You expect the place to be stable, boss? I expect it to be less stable every minute, I answered. The anchor is still working. We will feel it. If something moves more than you can stomach, you fall back and call it. Ellis, the pad engineer, strapped a compact field monitor to his chest. The monitor was a simple device, just a metal plate with a screen that displayed how strong the teleport field was in your immediate area. It was meant for testing pad edges. Tonight, it would tell us when we were getting close to the anchor. We got feed from the anchor models, he told me. Core should be somewhere near the top of whatever that used to be. He jerked his chin toward the bay. Municipal Hall by the look of the footprint. Then we climb, I answered. We stepped out. The moment my boots crossed the painted perimeter line, my body reverted to old habits. Move, scan, step, scan, keep a running tally of escape routes, catalogue every sound. The neighborhood towered in front of us, a cliff of misaligned stone. We entered through what had once been a street-level plaza. The slab had printed a section of it near the outer edge, a ragged mouth under an overhanging building. The entrance was half blocked by a fallen balcony, its rail wrapped around 2 motionless bodies like a bent spine. Beyond that, an improvised tunnel ran inward, where collapsing walls had left just enough clearance to squeeze through. Ghost story territory, Yorn muttered, ducking under a leaning slab. Ghosts bleed less, I answered. Inside, the temperature dropped a few degrees. We clicked our helmet lights on. They cut thin cones through dust and drifting grit. The first stretch of tunnel was tight but manageable, concrete and tile on both sides, ceiling scraping my helmet. We moved single file, passing a series of wall-mounted screens frozen mid-broadcast, their glass warped where they had fused with another surface during the jump. The first living man we encountered hung 5 meters in, pinned to the ceiling. At first I thought he was rubble. The lower half of his body emerged from the ceiling slab at an angle, legs dangling in the open air. Shoes, socks, half a pair of trousers. His upper body remained trapped above under the weight of the floor we walked on. As we passed under him, his legs kicked. Raffi flinched, then grabbed one ankle to steady him. Easy, easy there. The legs jerked harder. From somewhere above, muffled by stone, a voice yelled. "Down here!" I called. "You're in a relocation zone. We are authority personnel. Are you in pain?" Stupid question. His heel scraped hard against my shoulder plate as if to answer. "I am stuck," the voice shouted. "They told us we would walk out into the new square. I cannot move my arms. I cannot feel anything below my ribs." "Name?" I asked. Alfie Pook." "Alfie, listen to me. We are heading deeper in to reach the control center. We cannot get you down safely right now. I need to know if you can breathe without help and if you can feel your fingers." There was a pause. "I can breathe," he answered. "I can move my fingers. I cannot see. Are my eyes open?" Raffi looked up. "They are," he called. "Good. That means your spine is intact for now," I told Alfie. "We will mark your position. Once we stabilize the block, we will see what we can do about getting you free." "How long?" I glanced at Ellis's monitor. The readout ticked slowly upward. We were still a long way from the core. I do not know, I answered. Hold on as long as you can. Where is my brother? Alfie asked. He was right beside me on the plaza. He had his hand on my arm. We were told to stay in contact. I looked at the slab we walked under. There were no other legs protruding. We will keep an eye out for him, I answered. I promise you that. Every promise you make out here climbs onto your back. I felt the weight of this one as we moved on. We progressed in short bursts. Every few meters the structure reminded us that it was not settled. Once, a shiver ran through the walls and the passage changed around us. A doorway that had been half exposed ground itself closed by a slab shifting down. Dust rained from the ceiling, peppering our visors. Anchor spike, Ellis muttered, flicking his monitor with one glove. Field climbed hard, then dropped. That happened again and we back up, I told him. It happened again, and again. Each time the tremor went deeper, the creaks louder. We pushed through an overturned bus, its frame fused into a storefront so thoroughly they had become one object. Men were tangled in the wreckage, some clearly gone, some still moving. We triaged constantly. This one breathing but trapped under 3 tons of concrete we could not shift without bringing the ceiling down. That one impaled through the torso on a steel support bar, eyes glassy, lips moving around silent words. When providing help meant more than a minute's work and a realistic chance of extraction, we marked, tagged, and moved on. When it was hopeless, we used the tools we carried for a different purpose. The remediation kit is not built for mercy. It holds coagulants for minor injuries, yes, but its real instruments are cutters and dissolvers meant to separate tissue from metal. We repurposed them where we could. I still remember one man on a stairwell, his legs extended into the wall and vanishing into a corridor beyond. He met my gaze with a clarity that told me he understood exactly how bad his situation was. "Can you feel your toes?" I asked. "No," he answered, "and I do not believe it would be good news if I could. Make it clean, will you?" We made it as clean as we could. Years in emergency response had taught me that sometimes the only thing you can take away from a scene is extra pain. You do not let yourself track the body count. You count decisions instead. That is how you stay functional. We climbed. The further in we went, the stranger the angles became. Streets that should have run flat now sloped at sharp inclines. Floors stacked over each other without any respect for the original building layout. We passed through long hallways walled on one side by apartment doors and on the other by a single continuous surface of flesh. A broad human layer pressed so thin against the wall that I could trace ribs under the skin. The smell hit us there for the first time. A thick sweetness like meat left too long near a heater. It crawled inside my helmet filters and clung to the back of my tongue. Raffi gagged once, then forced it down. "Ellis, tell me we are getting closer, so this is at least suffering with a purpose." "Field levels are climbing," Ellis answered. He tapped the monitor. "That way." He pointed toward a narrow alley where 2 structures had tried to occupy the same horizontal space and failed. One wall bulged into the alley, the other sank, leaving a zigzag path barely wide enough for single file. We went that way. Halfway through, a door burst open in front of us. It did not swing properly. It extruded, peeling out of the wall like someone pulling a sheet away from a mattress. Attached to it was half a man. He came forward with it, dragged by the motion of the building. His left side remained fused inside the room. His right arm and leg tore free, leaving strips of tissue behind that still clung to the frame like wet paper. He collapsed at our feet with a sound I had never heard before and do not want to again. I knelt automatically. "Easy there," I murmured. "You are out. You are clear of the wall." His eyes rolled to focus on me. There was a chip embedded in the skin near his temple, just at the hairline. The casing glowed strong, unlike the near-dead tags we saw in ordinary accidents. "You authority," he rasped. "Yes, I am Brogan. This is my team. What is your name?" "Dorian," he whispered. "Relocation control. We were in the hall, the transfer board. We triggered the countdown and... He coughed, wet, then forced the words out in short burst. We were not supposed to ride it. We were observers. The anchors had already checked in, out there in the plaza. We were just there to make sure the numbers looked right. Ellis shifted closer. You were staff, internal. You knew about macro. Dorian's laugh came out as a painful wheeze. Knew just enough to trust the models. We'd been told it was safe. We'd tested on cargo. The anchors were volunteers. Compensation package, lifetime healthcare, you know the pitch. Volunteers. Raffi muttered. They knew they could end up like this. Dorian's gaze drifted past us, to the layered wall of flesh lining the hallway. They knew they might feel strange for a while, he answered. That was the phrase. Strange. A little extra pressure. Maybe some nausea. His tone sharpened. They were never told about this. The anchor suits were supposed to carry the load, not their bare bodies. Anchor suits. That phrase was new. What is an anchor suit? I asked. Field harness, Dorian whispered. Exoskeleton with built-in dampers. Looks like oversized body armor. You wear it over the implant. It takes the strain when the field grabs you. And where are those suits now? I asked. He blinked slowly. Storage. We had not finished fitting the last batch. He grimaced. Budget cuts. We told them as long as the implants were live, it would be fine. We were wrong. Another tremor went through the block. The hallway around us flexed, the wall of flesh stretching and then snapping back. Dorian's body jerked in my hands. The anchor core, I pressed. Where is it located? We need to find the local control room. He focused on me with an effort. Civic Hall. They turned the council chamber into the anchor bay. We routed the main feed through there. It is built to handle crowds, easy to repurpose. Take the main plaza route, go up 2 levels, follow the power trunk. You will feel it before you see it. His gaze dropped to his body. His free arm stopped twitching, settling into a limp weight. I cannot feel my legs, he murmured. Are they still there? I glanced back. His left leg had never left the room. His right was a mess from the door's motion, nothing worth lying about. No, they are gone. He closed his eyes. Figures. I sign up to monitor the storm from inside the bunker, and I end up outside without half my parts. His lips curved in a small, crooked smile. Do me a favor. Whatever you find in there, make sure this does not happen again. To anyone. That is not our call, Ellis muttered. Dorian's eyes snapped open. It is now. He coughed again, harder. This time, something inside him gave out. His chest stopped fighting. I knelt there a heartbeat longer than protocol recommends. Then I set his body gently aside and stood. You heard the man. I told the team. Civic Hall. Anchor Bay. We move. The route Dorian had given us turned out to be mostly intact, in its own wrong way. The main plaza was a sloped bowl now, one side higher than the other, where the slab had grabbed it mid-tilt. Benches and kiosks had skidded during the jump and frozen where they crashed into each other. Men lay scattered between them, many still in the clothes they had worn for the relocation. Work jackets, home uniforms, a few formal suits for those who thought moving the district was a ceremony worth dressing up for. The most intact structure in sight stood at the far edge, a long, low building with tall windows, its facade warped but recognizable. The Civic Hall. It leaned against an office block that had arrived half buried in its side, but the main doors were still there, their frame twisted into a diagonal. Field levels are spiking, Ellis warned. Anchor is definitely inside that. Then we keep our feet under us, I answered. We crossed the plaza as quickly as we could without stepping on anyone who might still be alive. Inside, the Civic Hall had turned into a throat. The lobby floor sloped upward, lifting us toward what had once been the council chamber. The walls bowed inward, their plaster cracked in long streaks that ran from floor to ceiling. Chunks of ceiling tile hung low enough that we had to duck to get through. As we climbed, I started hearing something new under the groans of shifting stone. A slow, rhythmic thud. It was faint at first, buried under other noises. Then it grew stronger, resolving into something I recognized from a more intimate context. A heartbeat. It was not coming from any one direction. It seemed to resonate through the floor, down the walls, through the air. Every few steps, my chest vibrated in time with it. "The anchor core," Ellis muttered. "It is cycling." "Meaning?" Raffi asked. "Meaning someone at the center is still alive," I answered. We topped the slope. The council chamber had been gutted. The tiered seats were gone, replaced by a broad floor reinforced with metal braces, half of which had buckled during the jump. Cables as thick as my arm ran from the walls toward the center, where a raised platform stood. The platform looked like an altar made by a committee of engineers and butchers. It was a circle of steel set into the floor, ringed by curved supports that arched inward like ribs. From each arch, a cluster of straps and clamps descended, some hanging loose, some still latched around bodies. Men were fixed to the supports in a ragged ring, each at a slightly different height. Some hung limp, heads lolling. Others strained against the restraints, muscles standing out under their skin as if they were pressing against invisible weight. Thick cables ran from the anchor implants at their temples to a central pillar. At the heart of it all, a single man stood upright, supported by a brace fixed to his spine. His arms were spread wide, bound to horizontal bars. His legs were encased in a cradle that rose from the floor. Tubes plugged into his veins, feeding something pale into his circulation. His implant was larger than the rest, a metal cuff that circled his head above the ears. It glowed with a blue light, bright enough to paint nearby faces with color. The heartbeat came from him. It thudded in time with the pulse visible in the tubes, in time with the faint tremor that traveled through the supports each cycle. Anchor captain, my mind supplied. The central point Taggart's macro design would be built around. The living core. He opened his eyes as we approached. They were a washed-out grey, clouded at the edges, but they tracked us without difficulty. "You took your time," he murmured. His voice carried through the chamber, clear despite the equipment braced around his chest. The acoustics in the gutted hall did the rest. "We came as soon as we could," I answered. "I am Brogan Brandt, remediation lead. Who are you?" "Darren Mulk, anchor core lead." He tried to shift his shoulders and winced as the braces held him. Or at least I was. Hard to tell what my job is now. Ellis's monitor screeched. The field reading maxed out, then settled. "Anchor output is off the charts," Ellis muttered. "You are holding the whole block together on your own." "That would explain the headache," Darren replied. I scanned the ring of other anchors. Some of them still moved. A man near the left side of the platform stared sightless at the ceiling. Another near the far rear shook in a slow, constant tremor. Others were clearly gone. Their implants glowed weakly, but there was no breath in their lungs, no tension in their limbs. One had slumped so far in his harness that his shoulder joints had torn. "Where are the rest?" I asked. "The volunteers from the plaza?" "Distributed," Darren answered. "They built the main anchor ring here, then used auxiliary carriers out in the plaza to support the outer volume. When things went sideways, the load shifted. Some anchors snapped, others stretched." His gaze flicked briefly toward the ceiling, where hair and a hand protruded from the stone near the rafters. "What happened?" I asked. "From your perspective?" "From mine?" He let out a short breath. "We lined up. We took our positions. The countdown ran. The field came up smooth. Then halfway through the jump, there was a surge, some kind of interference from the receive side. The load shifted. The outer anchors took a hit. We tried to damp it, but the field grabbed hold of whatever it could. Buildings, streets, people. It dragged everything toward a point that did not match the one in our models. We were supposed to land in the inland hub. Whatever went wrong shoved us here instead. It pulled us sideways without letting go of where we started." "And you have been holding it together ever since," I finished. Trying, he corrected. I'm not sure what we are holding it together for anymore. I stepped closer to the central pillar. The control interface had once been a clean cluster of screens and contact plates. Now it was a mess of fused hardware and bone. Someone had bolted a manual console to the side as a backup, and even that had not been spared. A hand grew from the edge of the screen housing, fingers frozen mid-reach. Can you still access the controls? I asked Darren. From inside the rig? Some. I can damp certain spikes, steer the worst of the instability away from the edges so we do not tear the whole slab off the pad. Beyond that, the board's half blind. Half our readings never updated when we landed. Director Taggart wants a status report, Ellis noted, checking his wrist set. He is asking whether the anchor can be safely brought down. Darren's laugh came out thin. Depends on your definition of safe. For me? For the men strapped to this thing? For the district still in transit? Rafi glanced at me. How much of the block is still out there? Darren's eyes unfocused for a moment, as if he were checking something only he could see. Based on what I felt during the surge, roughly half the district volume never detached from the origin. We are holding the part that did. The rest, he grimaced, either failed entirely or is still hanging in the path between. I looked at Ellis. You can confirm that? We do not have direct readings. The board here is damaged. The network view we get from command claims the transfer is still in progress. That could mean anything from half attached to the software refuses to admit it is dead. Which is it? Rafi asked. Your guess is as good as mine. I turned back to Darren. Director Taggart told us you were all volunteers, fully informed about the risks. Darren snorted. He would think that. We were told we might feel strain, that we might be tired afterward. That is all. No one mentioned we might end up threaded through our own city like wire. He met my eyes. If we stay like this, the system keeps trying to correct, he went on. Every correction grinds more people into the walls. Every person it grinds changes the mass distribution, and the field tries to fix that, and on it goes. You do not need me to map that out for you. You can hear it. I could. The heartbeat, the creaks, the distant crashes. What if we cut your output? I asked. Bring the anchor down slow. Let the block settle where it is. You could try. You would need to decouple the core from the network and bleed the field off through the pad. That is a lot of energy. Too much. You lose control, it jumps to the nearest connected node and you get a cascade. Hubs going dark all across the grid. Cargo lost. People lost. A trail of half-prints from here to inland. So our options are what? Rafi asked. Leave you here until the system grinds everyone down to something it can stomach. Or pull the plug and hope the resulting mess kills fewer people overall. That is the shape of it, Darren answered calmly. He looked tired, but not surprised. Like a man who had been rehearsing this assessment in his head for a long time. I moved around the pillar to the manual console. The screen still worked, though its edges crawled with ugly artifacts where the casing had merged with someone's forearm. I tapped up the log. It gave me a list of events: anchor activation, field ramp, load acquisition. At the top, in a form line that looked as mundane as any shift roster, were two names. Saul Taggart, Strategic Operations Approval, Darren Malk, Anchor Core Lead. Below them, a handful of senior engineers and local administrators had signed off with their own digital stamps. This was not just a partner facility gone rogue. Taggart's name is on the launch key. Of course it is, Darren answered. He has been pushing this project through for years. Future-proof transit, he calls it. No more leaving cities behind when the storms eat the coast. The trial was his gift to the district. They did not know they were the test bed until relocation day. You could have said no, Ellis muttered. Darren's expression turned flat. You ever turn down a promotion from someone who controls your salary, housing, and medical coverage? You ever told your family you are going to pass up a chance to get them moved inland because you do not like the look in your director's eyes? Ellis dropped his gaze. Darren went on, quieter. They promised us safeguards, fail-safes. They promised no single anchor would ever be overloaded. We believed them. That is on us. He focused on me again. What happens now is on you. I felt that line sink in. They will not like that framing, I answered. I imagine not. The console pinged. A new message line scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Command query. Anchor core status, stable. Recommended action. I stared at those two words. Recommended action. They were asking me to put into writing what would happen if we pulled Darren down or left him up. They wanted a sentence they could point to later when they explained to a committee that they had followed procedure. Rafi read over my shoulder. They are going to do whatever keeps the grid intact. Whatever we say, they will steer it that way. But if we pretend we never saw this, we become part of their report. Field technicians observed no feasible alternative. Then we do not pretend, I answered. I keyed in our assessment. Anchor core, human integration critical to current stability, continued operation guarantees, ongoing structural correction with high fatalities inside arrival. Mass slow shutdown via standard macro routes not feasible without risking network-wide propagation only contained option. Localized disconnection of anchor core from pad. Physical severance of arrival mass. It felt obscene, summarizing so much pain in a paragraph, but that was the language the system understood. I added one last line. Note, all options result in mass casualties. Choice is between wider network failure and sacrifice of current arrival block. I sent it. The chamber felt very quiet after the message chime. Darren watched me. You could have softened that, he remarked. I have softened a lot of things over the years, I answered. This one needs sharp edges. Good. The console rang again, almost immediately. Command response. Localized severance not authorized at this time. Remediation to hold position and await further analysis. No manual interference with anchor core. They wanted more time, more models, more distance between their decision and the moment people died. You know what they are doing, Rafi muttered. They are looking for a way to word it so this never touches them. Of course, Darren replied. They are authority. It is in the name. Another anchor on the ring groaned. His harness creaked as his body sagged further. Darren's gaze tracked the movement. How long can you hold? Hard to say. He smiled faintly. An hour? A day? Until my heart gives out, the implant fails, or the field finds a weaker link somewhere else to chew on. Time feels strange in here. I looked around the chamber. The supports, the cables, the men wired into the machinery. The transit grid's miracle made visible for once, instead of hidden in clean diagrams and glossy pamphlets. Rafi stepped closer to me, his voice low on our private channel. If they will not authorize a clean cut, he murmured, what do we do? His eyes searched mine. For years he had treated me like a steady point, the man who always knew which box to tick, which line to write in the report, the one who never flinched. I had used procedure as armor. This was the first time I could feel it crack. We do our job. And our job is what, exactly? Clean up, or stop this from spreading? I looked at Darren, pinned at the center of his steel halo. He met my eyes evenly. You know the answer. You just do not like it. He was right. If we did nothing, the macro engine would keep trying to correct the arrival until nothing inside that block resembled a neighborhood. Then it might move on to the rest of the line. If we intervened without authorization, we could stop it here. Locally. We could also end careers, destroy the pad, and maybe trigger a cascade if we misjudged our cuts. One clean articulation of the dilemma pressed itself to the front of my mind. We can live as cleaners, I said quietly, wiping up after the machine and pretending we never saw how it works. Or we can admit we are standing inside it, and that it will keep grinding people down until someone jams something in the gears. Rafi's mouth twisted. That is it, he agreed. Darren's smile flickered. Welcome to the anchor's view. My wristband vibrated with another incoming message from command. I did not open it. For the first time since I took the remediation job, I considered doing something without a box to tick. "We cannot solve this here and now," I told Rafi. "Not in this room. Not with this gear. We need a way to cut the anchor off from the pad without handing the excess charge to the rest of the grid." "And where do we find that?" he asked. I looked at the supports, at the cable runs leading down through the floor into the deeper machinery. Then I thought about the one system in this hub built to chew through anything the pad threw at it and reduce it to ash. "The scrapers," I answered. "The incinerators. The entire cleanup line. We spend our lives feeding it scraps, and we have never asked what happens if we aim it at something that is still attached." Ellis's head snapped up. "You want to use the remediation system to cut the anchor loose," he said. I met his gaze. "You just heard a director tell us there is no authorized way to end this without pretending most of these people do not exist. If we walk out of here and let that happen, that is on us." I jerked my chin toward the floor. "The cleanup line is built into the pad. It is local. It does not feed energy back into the grid. If we can reroute its cutters and heat to carve this block away from the main slab while the anchor is still holding steady, we might be able to drop the entire arrival mass into a dead zone." "That would kill everyone still bound into it," Ellis whispered. "Yes, and it might keep half the city from following." Darren exhaled slowly. "That is the first practical plan I have heard since this started. You will not sell it to command, but you might not need to." He wiggled his fingers as far as the restraints allowed. "Anchor contracts come with one perk they did not mention in the brochure," he added. "Direct override lines. There are manual release points under this platform. They were meant as last resort safety controls if something went wrong during calibration. If you find a way to cut ties to the pad, I can help you synchronize it with the anchor drop." His voice stayed level. Only his eyes betrayed how much he understood what that would mean for him personally. "Why?" I asked. "Why help us?" "Because I am tired of feeling people die through the rig. If someone is going to pull this thing apart, I would rather it be you than a director who never shows his face in this room. Decide fast, Brandt," he added. "One way or another, I am running out of time." I glanced at Rafi. He did not look away. "I am with you." The chamber trembled again. Out on the slab, the city block groaned as another adjustment tried to force it into a shape the machine could accept. We had come in as cleaners. We left the anchor bay as something else entirely. With a new job none of us had been trained for. Cut a living city off the machine designed to deliver it, and hope we could live with the pieces. We retraced our steps out of the anchor bay with the feeling you get leaving a hospital room where someone is still on the table. The heartbeat followed us. It thudded through the walls, steadier now that I knew where it came from. Darren held the block together while we searched for a way to cut him loose from the thing he served. On the way down, the building reminded us that it was still very much alive. A stairwell that had been barely passable on the way up now sagged further, a whole flight drooping like wet cardboard. We picked our way along the remaining steps, boots slipping on dust and stray fragments of brick. The wall of flesh on our right stretched with the motion, pores opening, closing, knuckles forming and vanishing under the surface, as if the men trapped inside were pressing against it in waves. No one complained. We were all saving our breath for the part where we had to run. By the time we reached the plaza again, the tremors had grown worse. Benches rattled. A kiosk slid a few centimeters down the slope, stopping only because it lodged against a tangle of frozen bodies. Rafi squinted toward the perimeter. "Is that—" he pointed. At the far edge of the plaza, near the place where the slab cut off the neighborhood, a cluster of men had found a pocket of relative safety. They huddled on the roof of a building that had printed almost clean. A set of exterior stairs led down from their perch to a halfway intact balcony. From there, a gap of a couple meters separated them from a pile of rubble that sloped down toward the perimeter. One of them waved both arms when he spotted our suit lights. "Authority!" he yelled. "Up here! We cannot get down, the ground keeps moving." Raffi swore. "They were not there before. The last shift must have pulled that block into place." Yorn shaded his visor with one hand, peering. "We could get a line up there. Use the rubble as a ramp, rig a path." "We do not have time," Ellis muttered. "Every second we waste here, the anchor digs in deeper." I looked up at the men. There were maybe 10. Some limped, some leaned on others. A boy clutched an older man's sleeve. They were the cleanest survivors I had seen yet, marked more by dust than blood. If we left them, the next surge might shear their little island off the rest and drop it into whatever was still trying to arrive. My training and my job pulled in opposite directions. "Quick grab," Raffi pushed. "No gear haul, no stretcher work. We run a line. You and I go up, relay them down, get them to the perimeter. In and out." "Fast in and out is still in," Ellis snapped. "You saw that stairwell. The strain is climbing. We are not rigged for rope work. We are rigged to cut." "Those are people, not numbers," Raffi shot back. They both looked at me. I knew exactly what command would log if we saved 10 men and triggered a block collapse that killed 1,000 more. I knew what I could live with better. "Fine," I decided. "We try. Very fast. The moment the structure twitches in a way I do not like, we abandon the attempt and fall back. Agreed?" Raffi nodded immediately. Ellis hesitated, then gave a short, sharp incline of his head. We moved. The rubble pile that led toward the building was a mess of broken concrete, bent railings, and bodies fused into both. We climbed it at a controlled scramble, testing each footing before we committed. Halfway up, a slab shifted under my boot. It slid a thumb's width, then stopped. A face emerged from the edge, pressed into the stone so tightly that only one eye and half a mouth showed. "Do not stand on him," the eye whispered. "I am moving," I promised. We reached the lower balcony, then the exterior stairs. The stairs twisted partway up, where another building had printed through them and sheared away half the steps. We squeezed past the gap, one at a time, hugging the wall. By the time we reached the roof, my shoulders burned and my lungs felt raw in the suit. The men there clustered around us with the desperate energy of people who have been holding their fear in check for too long. "How bad is it?" one asked. "Is this just us? Did the rest of the block make it?" "Most of it is here," I answered. "It is just in the wrong shape. We are working on getting you all stable." "You can get us out," another pressed. "We can get you down to the perimeter," I told him. "Out comes later." Close up, they looked even more normal than they had from below. Scrapes, bruises, a few sprains. One man's arm had a deep cut where a glass pane must have grazed him mid-jump, but his bones looked intact. The boy clinging to his sleeve stared at us with wide eyes. "Who is in charge here?" I asked. The oldest man, the one the boy held onto, lifted his chin. "I was block coordinator," he answered. "Name's Thomas. My job was to get people into lines when the relocation announcement came. That seems a long time ago now." "Good enough," I told him. "You are first down. Show them how to place their feet. We go one at a time, 2 of us spotting on the stairs, 2 more below. No one rushes." He looked like he wanted to argue, then caught the tremor in the slab under his feet and thought better of it. We started moving them. The first few trips went well. Thomas descended with the focus of a man walking across thin ice. Raffi matched his pace, hand resting lightly on his elbow. They reached the halfway landing without incident, then the balcony, then the rubble slope. Once there, Ellis guided them toward the perimeter. Next came the boy, then 2 men who limped but could still bear weight. On the 4th pass, the heartbeat shifted. I felt it in my ribs. The rhythm stumbled, then resumed, but the aftershock ran through the building like a long, slow breath. "Anchor spike," Ellis called from below. "Field reading just jumped." The slab under my boots shuddered. "Move," I ordered. "We are done. Pull back." "We still have 6 up here," one of the roof men protested. We do not have 6, I answered. We have however many we can get down before the next surge. That might be 1, 2 if we are lucky. Line up, now. They did. We got 1 more down. A second made it to the halfway landing before the world dropped underneath him. The next surge was not like the little adjustments we had felt before. It was a full body convulsion. The entire block jerked sideways a hand's breadth. The stairs twisted as if someone had grabbed them and wrung them like wet cloth. The gap we had squeezed through on the way up widened, tearing the steps into hanging segments. The man on the landing lost his footing. Rafi lunged for him. His hand caught the man's sleeve. For one useless heartbeat, they hung together in empty space. Then the landing ripped free and dropped, taking both of them with it. The rubble below rose toward them. They hit in a tangle of limbs and dust. The landing slab crushed a section of the pile, then ground to a stop at an angle. Rubble cascaded around it, knocking Ellis off his feet and showering him with fragments. My whole body tried to move at once. "Hold the roof!" I snapped at the remaining men. "Do not move. Do not even breathe hard. I will be back." I did not wait for an answer. The climb down felt twice as long as the climb up. Every slab I stepped on threatened to slide. Every handhold shifted under my grip. By the time I reached the landing slab, Ellis had already scrambled up to it. He braced his shoulders under one edge, legs shaking. "I cannot lift this," he gasped. "I can barely keep it from dropping further." "Then do not lift," I told him. "You just keep it exactly where it is." Rafi lay in the shadow of the slab, half buried. The man he had tried to save was gone. All that remained was a smear beneath the edge and a shoe wedged between 2 broken stones. Rafi had taken the rest of the impact. The slab had caught his lower body. His suit was crushed from the waist down, fabric torn where jagged concrete had chewed through. His right leg disappeared entirely under the stone. His left was bent at an angle that did not belong to any healthy skeleton. His visor had cracked. A fine spiderweb of lines radiated from near his temple. Blood ran down inside the clear material in a thin, slow sheet. His eyes were open. "You are late," he murmured. I dropped to my knees beside him, fingers already probing his neck seal, his chest. The suit's built-in med readouts plastered my visor with numbers that each had their own special kind of bad news. "You held the landing for me," he went on. "I got most of me clear. That counts as teamwork. Broken legs, maybe a cracked hip. We get the slab off you, we brace you, we carry you out. You get to complain about long-term rehab while I fill out forms." He tried to laugh and choked instead. "I cannot feel anything below my stomach," he whispered. "That is either very good anesthesia or very bad data." Ellis's breath hitched with effort. "This thing is slipping." I pressed my hand to the slab, feeling the faint vibrations of the unstable city under it. Every pulse from the anchor sent a tiny ripple through the concrete. If the slab moved even a little, it would finish the job it had started on Rafi's torso. "Do we have any jack rigs?" I asked. "Any of the portable lifts from the gear room?" "Not here," Ellis answered. "We packed light." Of course we had. We had been told not to touch anything. Rafi watched me. "You know, this is the part where you step back and let the fire systems handle it. That is the job, right? Contain, observe, report." "Do not," I warned. "I am serious." He tried to shift his shoulders and winced. "You brought me into this because you knew I would follow you. You do not get to stop now just because I picked a bad slab to stand under." I clenched my teeth. The anchor heartbeat thudded again. Dust drifted down from above. "We do not have time for this conversation," I told him. "We need to move you, and then we need to figure out how to cut this anchor loose before the whole grid goes with it." "You are not moving me," he answered calmly. "Look at the angle. Look at your readings. Even if you get this slab off, whatever is left of my spinal column will not thank you for the effort." He pulled in a shallow breath. "What you can do," he went on, "is let me be your excuse." I stared at him. "That hard-cut idea? Using the scrapers?" "Director Taggart is never going to sign off on it. You know that. You have been dodging direct orders all shift." At some point, that is going to catch up with you. Or you can say you did it because you were trying to save your injured man on the floor and you misjudged the blast radius. Human error. Remediation lead got emotional. Tried a risky maneuver. Tragedy. We will learn from it. His mouth twisted. You do not like the machine as it stands, he added. Fine, break it. But do not pretend you are doing it calmly. Use me. I am halfway mulch already. Make it count. I wanted to argue. To tell him that I did not need an excuse, that I was ready to own the decision. It would have been a lie. My whole life in the authority had trained me to write the kind of report you could hide behind. Raffi was offering me a way to wreck their project and still leave them with a narrative they knew how to file. No, I answered. His eyes widened. No, he repeated. No excuses, I told him. If I do this, it is on me, not on some accident I could have avoided if I had followed my own rules. You are not going to be a footnote in their justifications. You are going to be my witness. I am going to be what now? I leaned closer. I am going to use the scrapers, I said. Deliberately, in full awareness. I am going to cut this block off the pad, even if command screams in my ear the whole time. And you are going to live long enough to back up my version when they come for me later. He stared at me for a beat, then barked a short, surprised laugh that turned into a cough. You always talk this big when I'm pinned under furniture, he managed. Only when the furniture is trying to bring friends, I told him. I hit my suit's internal comm. Digby, we have an injury on the plaza slope. One tech partially crushed, critical. We need a med team at the perimeter with a spine rig and a cutter. They do not step onto the slab. I will bring him to them. You cannot carry a man in that condition across that terrain, Digby objected instantly. Not safely. We do not have safe, I snapped. We have him dying under a rock or him dying in transit. I will take my chances with the latter. A pause, then a low exhale. I will have medical waiting. Brogan, they are asking what you found in the core. We will discuss that when my people are out of the collapse zone. For now, log this. The anchor is not coming down clean. The only way out is to burn our way free. I cut the channel before he could respond. Ellis, I called. We are changing plans. You hold that slab for another minute while I get a brace under it. Then you and Yorn fall back and start rerouting the cleanup line. To where? Ellis demanded. To everywhere the pad touches this block, I answered. We are going to cut around it like we are taking out a tumor. You want to carve a ring through the slab? Ellis stared at me. We do not have cutters that deep. We have scrapers that were built to chew through cargo hulls and haul their guts to fire, I told him. We just never asked them to focus on one continuous line. He hesitated. I did not have time for his conscience to catch up to him. You can stay here and argue, I snapped, or you can help me find a way to force this thing to be local. That did it. I will need access to the scraper control nodes, he replied. Floor level, near the pad edge. Then get moving, I told him. Once you are there, patch me into the ring. I wedged my shoulders under the slab beside Ellis, muscles screaming. He slid out from under it, shaking out his arms and scrambled down the rubble. Do not drop that, Raffi muttered. I have no intention of dropping anything, I grunted. Between the two of us, we managed to shove a broken beam under the slab's edge. It took most of our remaining strength, but the beam wedged in place, taking enough of the weight that I trusted it to hold for a little while. I eased out. Do not move, I told Raffi. Was not planning to run laps. We rigged a quick sling from spare strapping, looping it under his arms. With Ellis's help, we levered his upper body free and down the slope, leaving his crushed lower half on the slab. I did not let myself dwell on that. The trip to the perimeter blurred into pain and concentration. We moved him in short bursts, pausing every few meters when the block shuddered. By the time we passed the painted line, my shoulders and back felt like they had been filled with broken glass. Medical met us at the boundary. They cut his suit open, slapped field supports around his torso, and loaded him onto a float stretcher. One of them glanced at me, eyes flicking over the gore on my suit. You are coming with us, he announced. No, he is, I have work to finish. Raffi caught my wrist with one hand. You are going to do it, he murmured. Yes. Good. He drew a shallow breath. Leave a mess they cannot sweep, something they have to step around. I intend to. They floated him away toward the medbay. I watched until he disappeared around a corner, then turned back toward the slab. The half-made city loomed, grinding quietly against itself. Ellis, I called on the local channel. Talk to me. I am at the scraper controls. His voice came through thin. I have tied the units into a manual ring. We can send them around the base of the arrival block in a continuous loop. They will cut whatever they meet at pad level. Good. Route the main incinerator feed into the pad's underfloor cleaning grid. Full heat. Bypass the safeties. You are going to overload the burn chambers. I know. You land this wrong, the blast could breach the underside of the pad. I know that too. He paused. You are sure? No. But certainty was a luxury we had burned hours ago. As sure as we are going to get, I answered. Bring the ring online, but hold them at the starting point. I need to get back to the core. The return trip through the warped neighborhood felt shorter and sharper. We knew the path now. We also knew, with every creak of the shifting walls, how much time we did not have. By the time we reached the anchor bay, the chamber had changed. More anchors hung limp in their harnesses. A few slots stood empty where bodies had torn free during surges. Their implants still glowed weakly, dangling from severed cables. Darren looked worse. His skin had taken on a grey cast. Sweat ran down his temples under the metal cuff. The tubes plugged into his veins pulsed weakly. You were gone a while, he murmured when he saw me. I had a detour. Your man? Still breathing, for now. He nodded once, accepting that as the best outcome on offer. The scrapers? Ellis is rerouting them to cut a ring through the pad, I told him. We will carve this entire block away. When the line is nearly complete, we drop the anchor and let the mass fall into a dead zone. A dead zone, he repeated. You have one of those handy? Not exactly, but if we sever the connection to the pad and the grid at the same time, the block will be just that, dead. No more field, no more corrections. He considered that. You might tear a crater in your slab, he noted. Better a crater than a cascade. He smiled faintly. I always liked practical men. I stepped up onto the platform beside him, bracing myself against one of the arches. Up close, the heartbeat was loud enough to feel in my teeth. How do we sink this? You mentioned release points under the rig. There are manual cutoff clamps on the anchor feeds, he answered. Most are locked or fused, but a few should still work. You will need to sever them in a specific order while I shift the load inside the field. If we get it right, we concentrate the remaining stress on me and the core. When you fire your cutters, the connection to the pad snaps at a single point instead of ripping randomly through the block. And if we get it wrong, he shrugged as far as the braces allowed. Then you die in an interesting way. He watched my face. You can still walk away. You tried. You filed your assessment. You got your man out. No one could accuse you of not caring. I would accuse me. He held my gaze, then nodded. Under the central column, he instructed. There are 3 access panels. 2 are for monitoring. One is the hard cut. You want the one with manually keyed clamps, not the automatic breaker. Auto is tied into command. Manual is mine. I crouched and reached under the console housing. My glove brushed metal, then caught on a lever. 3 small panels sat in a row beneath the surface, each with a set of mechanical clamps and a hand-sized bar. Which first? I asked. The outer anchors, he answered. Left panel, work from the top down. Each clamp you pop will dump more load onto me. Do not pause. It will hurt either way. Dragging it out will just stretch the pain without improving the result. You do not make this sound like a sales pitch. I am past selling. I wrapped my hand around the first clamp on the left panel. You ready? He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. Do it. I pulled. The clamp snapped open with a sharp metallic crack. The chamber lurched, as if someone had kicked the building. The anchors around the ring jerked. Several arched their backs, mouths open in silent cries. Darren threw his head back, teeth bared. The implant cuff blazed, flooding his face with sickly blue light. His heartbeat surged, then steadied. "Next!" he ground out. I worked my way down the panel, popping clamps. With each one, the tremors grew. The supports rattled. Dust sifted down. Somewhere above us, masonry split with a harsh crack. By the time I reached the bottom clamp, Darren's whole body shook. The tubes in his veins ran cloudy. His hands clenched around the horizontal bar until his knuckles went pale. "Outer anchors are loose," I reported. "Good," he panted. "That isolates the core. Now the middle panel. That one severs the auxiliary links to the pad. Same deal, top to bottom. No hesitating." "Ellis," I called into my comm. "Status on the scraper ring." "They are in position," he answered. "We have a full circle around the base of the block. Their blades are kissing the outer edge. On your word, we start cutting." "Hold," I told him. To Darren, I added, "Middle panel now." I flipped the first clamp on the second panel. This time, the reaction felt different. The tremor came not from the structure, but from the floor itself. The pad under the building groaned. The heartbeat thudded harder, faster. My visor filled with warnings as local field readings went wild. "Done," I gritted out, flipping the last two. I moved as quickly as I dared. Second clamp. Crack. A line of force like a horizontal lightning strike rippled through the chamber, tossing grit into the air. Third clamp. The implant cuff flashed so bright I had to squint. For a second, everything froze. The trembling stopped. The groans quieted. Even the faint cries from the remaining anchors cut off. In that hollow, breathless silence, I could hear only one thing. Darren's heart. It hammered in my ears, out of sync with my own. Each beat sent a visible twitch down his arms and into the restraints. "We are on the knife now," he whispered. "All connection to the pad is running through my core. When you bring your cutters online, that is where the line will snap." "And you?" He smiled, small and tired. "I am the fuse, Brant. That was always the job, even if no one wrote it down that way." I clenched my teeth. "Last panel," he urged. "That one severs command's leash. Once you flip those, they cannot override what we are about to do." My hand found the third panel's clamps. In some other life, in some better system, this panel would never have existed. Or it would have required a key from a dozen different officials. Here it only needed a man in a suit, willing to take the blame. "On 3, you pull and your man starts cutting. Let the scrapers chew as deep as they can. When you feel the floor give, you come back to the core and finish it." "You want me at the center when it goes," I realized. "I need you here," he corrected. "Someone has to haul these last clamps when my hands stop listening." I drew a breath. I braced my feet, gripped the top clamp of the third panel. 1, Darren counted. His heart thudded. 2. The pad seemed to lean under us, the block above shifting its weight in anticipation. 3. I yanked. The chamber exploded into motion. It did not come as a sound first. It came as a feeling, like standing too close to a transformer when it kicks on. The air thickened. The floor shook so violently that my knees buckled. On the comm, Ellis shouted, "Scrapers are cutting!" I pictured the ring of machines at the pad's edge dropping their blades, biting into concrete, meat, and whatever other mess lay between the living city and the bare slab. They had been built to scrape arrival rubble. Now they carved a trench around a whole neighborhood. Heat alarms flared on my visor as the thermal cleaning grid roared into life beneath us. The big burn chambers were never meant to take this volume at once. Their temperature climbed toward ranges that made metal think about softening. Darren convulsed. The implant cuff blazed white, then red, the light leaking into the straps and supports like fire through lamp oil. "Primary locks," he gasped. "Bottom row, pull them." I dropped to a crouch and reached for the third panel again. The clamps I had left unflipped hummed under my hand, hot as stove coils. I did not give myself time to think. I just pulled. Each clamp cracked free with a percussive jolt that ran up my arm. The floor jumped in response. Thin cracks zipped across the chamber, connecting in spiderwebs. Somewhere far below, I felt the scraper's blades dig their way through the last of the pad's connective tissue. "Ring is complete," Ellis yelled. "We are through to the underside. Heat levels are red across the board. We cannot keep this up much longer, or we melt something structural." "Hold for 10 breaths," I ordered. "Then cut power to the scrapers and seal the incinerators. We do not want the whole hub dropping into the basement." "You will not have 10 breaths," Darren rasped. He was right. The pad under us lurched. Not a tremor this time, not a shiver. A full, sweeping shift. The entire block dropped a fraction of a meter. That was all it took. Where the scrapers had cut, the ring opened. The mass of fused city tore itself free of the pad and its supports, slumping deep into the severed gap. The sensation was like standing on a ship deck when it takes a wave broadside. The floor tilted, then slammed, then settled. Alarms screamed in my ears. Dust exploded into the chamber from every crack and joint. The anchors still hanging on the ring shuddered and fell limp, their implants winking out one by one. At the center, Darren jerked as if struck. "Now!" he gasped. "Last clamps!" His heart's rhythm had gone wild. I grabbed the remaining fasteners on the third panel and pulled. They did not crack this time. They tore. The metal screamed as the clamps ripped free, their housings distorting under the stress. A surge of force lashed up through the panel, through my arms, through my chest. For a single burning instant, I felt the macro field as something personal, focused and furious. Then it snapped. The implant cuff around Darren's head blew out in a spool of molten metal and light. He arched, every muscle in his body clenched, then sagged as the braces took his weight. The heartbeat cut off. The sudden silence hit harder than any vibration. No more tremors, no more creaks, no more distant grinding of streets slipping into buildings. The city on the slab held still. In the new quiet, my own pulse sounded loud and small in my ears. "Grid!" I croaked, not sure if anyone could hear me. Ellis answered, breathless. "The wider network is stable. We got a surge on the local node that just flattened every sensor on the bay, but the other hubs are still ticking. From their point of view, Central just went dark for a moment and then came back as a blank spot. No cascade." "Scrapers?" I asked. "Offline. Incinerators cooling. We pushed them past spec, but they held." "Anchor?" No one answered that. I turned. Darren hung limp in his brace. Smoke drifted up from the metal cuff, curling around his hair. His eyes were half open, staring at nothing. His chest did not move. I reached for his neck on instinct, fingers pressing through the thick collar of his harness to the place where you would expect a pulse. There was nothing. I let my hand drop. "Anchor is down," I reported. Outside on the slab, the half-made neighborhood sat in a ring of scorched concrete. No more shifts, no more surges. Just a dead, twisted block of buildings and streets and bodies, fused forever in the shape the disaster had given them. They did not arrest me that day. You do not arrest the man who just prevented your hub from turning itself into a bomb. You patch the hub, you wrap tape around the worst holes, you get your traffic running again. Then you start sharpening the knives. In the immediate aftermath, we were too busy to think about long-term consequences. We moved through the now static block, cataloguing the dead. Without the field trying to rearrange everything, some of the extraction work became possible. A few men we had tagged earlier were still alive, buried under rubble that was now safe enough to lift. We pulled Alfie Pook down from the ceiling slab. His spine was broken, but his brain was intact. He cried when we told him that half the district had never arrived. We retrieved Thomas and the boy from the roof, both of them somehow untouched by the final drop. They clung to each other while we guided their steps along a path through the ruin. Everywhere we went, I felt Darren's absence as a physical thing. The heartbeat that had rattled the block was gone. All that remained was the shape of the damage it had held in check. Command avoided me for the first few hours. Then, the messages began. Requests for detailed incident reports, queries about my decision-making process, invitations to discuss the sequence of events in a controlled setting. Digby intercepted as many as he could. There will be inquiries, he told me in the gear room as we stripped out of our ruined suits. Panels, hearings. They will want a narrative that makes sense in their language. You routed scrapers outside of authorized procedures. You triggered a localized collapse. From their vantage point, that is insubordination at best and sabotage at worst. I stopped their grid from cooking half the region, I answered, peeling the last strip of suit away from my bruised skin. If they want to call that sabotage, they can write the word as big as they like. He gave me a long, measuring look. You sure you want to hang your neck out that far? He asked quietly. You could lean on the injury, let them frame this as a desperate attempt to save your technician that went sideways. Less neat, less intentional, easier for everyone. I thought of Rafi's face under the slab, the way he had offered himself as an excuse, and how close I had come to taking it. No, I answered. We did this because it was the only way to stop the block from grinding itself and everything connected to it into paste. I am not interested in pretending otherwise. He nodded slowly. In that case, you are going to need copies of anything they might decide to lose. He slid a small, battered drive across the bench toward me. What is this? Raw logs from the core. Anchor feed, command authorizations, your clamp sequence, scraper reroute. I pulled them before the admin team got their hands on the servers. Consider it an early retirement gift. You just confessed to data theft, I noted. I confessed nothing, he countered. You misheard. I am an aging supervisor who pushed the wrong button while backing up incident files. Whatever you choose to do with your personal archive afterward is on you. I picked up the drive. Why? I asked. Because I watched them talk around your block of Twisted City like it was a faulty shipment. Because I saw Taggart's name on that macro approval, and because at some point in a man's career, he either starts making up for what he has ignored, or he spends his last years pouring drinks for ghosts. His mouth twitched. Besides, he added, I would like to see the look on their faces when this shows up somewhere they do not control. I slipped the drive into a hidden pocket in my undershirt. Thank you. You can thank me by writing a report I can live with. Something that does not make you sound like a reckless maniac. Reckless maniacs are easy to bury. Calm professionals who make unpalatable choices are harder to erase. He clapped my shoulder once and walked away. They moved me off the floor. That was their first real response. 2 weeks after the incident, after the initial statements and the first round of quiet interrogations, a bland notification arrived on my band. Effective immediately, Brogan Brandt was reassigned from remediation lead at Central Hub to a newly created position in transit safety audit. No demotion in pay, no notation of disciplinary action. Just a sudden sideways step out of the places where things break and into the rooms where people talk about preventing them. My new office had a window that looked out over the quarantined slab. They fenced the fused block off, wrapped it in scaffolding and containment netting, and declared it a restricted zone under ongoing investigation. Officially, they labeled it a combined field and structural failure during experimental transfer. Unofficially, everyone on the floor called it the tomb. From my desk, I watched crews build a secondary pad beside it, redirecting traffic piece by piece. The tomb sat untouched in the middle of it all, a twisted monument they could not dismantle without admitting how it had been made. Rafi survived. The slab had crushed his lower spine. The med team stabilized him, grafted synthetic bone where they could, and rigged him with a brace that let him sit upright without passing out. His legs remained more decoration than functional hardware. When I first saw him in the rehab ward, he greeted me with his usual charm. "Took you long enough," he grumbled from his chair. "I was starting to think you were screening my calls." "You are not that important," I told him, moving a stool closer. "How do you feel?" Like someone folded me in half and stapled me to a slab, then cut me loose and told me to make the best of the new angles. He snorted. Medical says I have a chance of walking again with enough work. I think they are lying to keep me motivated. Do you believe them? I asked. I believe they like having hopeful patients. Whether hope lines up with reality is above their grade. He watched me for a moment. You did it, he went on. I had the rehab feed on. They showed the grid, central blipped, then came back without dragging half the map with it. You cut the block off and left everything else standing. We did it, I corrected. I just happened to be the idiot with his hands on the clamps. So now what? He tipped his head back, studying the ceiling. They throw you into a dark hole, give you a shiny medal? Both? They moved me to safety audit, I answered. Desk work, reviewing incident protocols, signing off on new procedures for relocation trials we are not supposed to run. He grimaced. They are keeping you close then. They are keeping me where they can keep an eye on me, I agreed, and where, if they ever decide to dust off macro transfer again, I will be one of the first to hear about it. You think they will try it again? After this? I hesitated. They will tell themselves they learned from it, I answered. They will design better harnesses, add more layers of oversight, use prettier language in their consent forms. And when the storms eat a few more coastal districts and the inland councils start screaming, they will dust off the models and call it a necessary risk. He studied my face. And you? He asked. When that day comes. I have a drive full of logs. Officially, it does not exist. Unofficially, it is going to keep moving until it reaches someone who can make noise outside the authorities' channels. A reporter, a council member with a grudge, a rival director who sees a chance. I do not care who starts the fire, as long as it burns through the layers trying to hide what we did here. That is a lot of hope for one piece of hardware, he noted. I do not need it to fix the system, I answered. I just need it to make wiping the slate clean expensive. He smiled, slow and crooked. There he is, he murmured. The man who explains everything to himself in neat boxes so he can sleep. You know this will not even out, right? Not really. I know, I said. But you are going to try anyway. That is the job now. He reached over and flicked my wristband with one finger. Then do it properly. Write your audits like weapons. Make them so sharp that anyone who reads them bleeds a little. And when they finally get around to firing you, come visit. We will watch the tomb together and make up better names for the things they are too scared to call what they are. I laughed, despite everything. Months later, on certain evenings when the office emptied out and the sky over the city turned a bruised color that reminded me of old blood under skin, I took the lift down to the perimeter. The tomb did not look any kinder in daylight. From ground level you could see details the overhead cameras missed. A car hanging nose down from the fourth floor of a tower, its tail sunk deep into what had been someone's bedroom. A row of storefronts crushed into each other, their signs half visible. A public bench protruding from a wall at shoulder height, its armrests wrapped around a frozen line of torsos. They had sandblasted some of the exposed surfaces to collapse them safely, but too much of it resisted. Stone fused with bone, metal grown into muscle, all cooled into one stubborn mass when the field died. On the closest face of the block, just beyond the perimeter barrier, an imprint of a human face bulged from the concrete. The features were soft, blurred by whatever last adjustments had tried to pass through them. You could still see the hint of a mouth, the curve of a nose, the shallow depressions where eyes lay closed beneath a thin skin of stone. The first time I saw it, I thought of Darren. There were no records of what they did with his body. The authority had collected the dead anchors, bundling them into sealed bags and shipping them to a facility I was not cleared to visit. Officially, he would end up a line in a memorial database, a name next to a date of death. This face on the slab was closer to the truth. I walked up to the barrier and rested my hand on the cold metal rail. Beyond it, The fused city sat unmoving inside its ring of scorched pad. No heartbeat, no grinding, no signs of life beyond the few hardy plants that had begun to colonize cracks where rainwater pooled. From the outside, you could pretend it was a failed construction project, a half-demolished block abandoned mid-work. From the inside, I knew better. I stood there until the chill of the rail seeped through my palm. In the end, that was the only monument any of them would get. Darren, the anchors, the men on the plaza who had trusted the announcement when it told them relocation would be a fresh start. Their city had arrived in the wrong place, in the wrong shape, and refused to finish arriving. The best I could do for them was make sure the world had to walk around the evidence. Behind me, the hub lights glittered on the new pad. Freight came and went. People jumped from one side of the network to another, arriving whole, stepping off onto clean platforms that looked as if they had never seen a drop of blood. I knew better there, too. I pressed my fingertips against the barrier until the metal bit into the skin. "You held it," I murmured, not sure whether I spoke to Darren, to the block, or to the part of myself that had finally stepped outside the neat lines of the manual. "You kept it from taking the rest. That has to count for something." No answer came. I did not expect one. I turned away eventually, climbing back toward my desk and my stack of safety forms, and my quiet, boring war against the next version of the project that had killed a city. Behind me, on the slab, the fused face watched nothing with stone-closed eyes. The last witness to a neighborhood that tried to move all at once and got caught halfway between where it was and where it thought it was going. That image followed me up the stairs and into every report I filed afterward. A city that would not finish arriving, and a man whose job at last was to make sure no one ever again called something like that minor instability with a straight face.